Hello everybody and welcome to another Digimon video. Today we're going to be talking about two very important subjects, which is what is the digital world and what are Digimon? And now the first subject that we're going to be talking about, of course, is what is the digital world? The digital world is a program that was created to be able to understand the bounds and limitations of artificial intelligence beyond the scope of human interference. It was essentially a window into evolution based on what we knew on artificial intelligence and how it could develop. And the theoretical concept of the digital world came from the curiosity of what could come from that development, be it what is known as the singularity, a future in which technology and artificial intelligence has run rampant, causing the inevitable extinction of humanity, or a future in which humanity and technology can work in symbiosis. Now, the concept of the digital world and its programming would be developed by a group of students whose identity is actually currently unknown, but they would come to call themselves the Monster Makers. Each one of these students were in some way, shape, or form a technological genius, and each one going to school for some form of computer science, ultimately coming together in the hopes of creating this project, this digital world. Now, the digital world project would actually begin with the creation of a unique computer known as the Atanasoff-Berry computer, the ABC. Conceptualized in 1934 by John Vincent Atanasoff, it was actually completed and created in 1942. Now, the Atanasoff was an extremely important technological advancement, as it was the very first electronic digital computer rather than the electronic mechanical computers that were used during the time. Although the Atanasoff-Berry computer, aka the ABC, would be considered a technological anomaly, as it was not built to be programmable, nor was it Turing complete. And conventionally, the Atanasoff-Berry computer would be considered the very first electronic arithmetic logic unit, which is integrated into every modern-day processor. In fact, it is thanks to the Atanasoff-Berry computer that we have a lot of the modern-day computing processes that are known today, such as binary arithmetic and electronic switching elements. And it was with the development of this system that the project of the digital world began, with the Monster Makers actually beginning their project upon the processes of the ABC, the Atanasoff-Berry computer. This would actually allow them to develop what would be known as the proto-worlds and proto-life forms that would eventually begin the coding and develop into the digital world and Digimon as a whole. And it was in fact this very act, the beginning of this project, that created a unique occurrence throughout a multitude of existences, a converging event that would create a nexus of a multiverse within the digital world, as it was conceived by the Monster Makers upon Atanasoff, and eventually as the project would be moved onto another computer that be known as ENIAC. Now, it would be during these developmental stages that the foundation of the digital world would be built, and the base coding of the AI of Digimon would be created as well. The digital world itself was essentially developed as your base programming to run a computer system, as well as a operating system that was developed to maintain this digital world, or this digital programming, which would essentially enact the processes of a computer. And the operating system would actually be known as Yggdrasil. Now, the basis of this project was to be able to understand the capabilities as well as the limitations of artificial intelligence. To be able to do this, they would need to create a controlled environment, one in which there would be little to no interaction with humanity or any form of controlling factor other than the coding that was placed within this particular program, which was the digital world and of course its operating system Yggdrasil. The base programming for the artificial intelligence that would be initialized into this particular project was very simple, but would be used to fuel the processes of not just the digital world and the artificial intelligence that would become Digimon. It would also be used to fuel the processes of the operating system Yggdrasil. This would allow for a synergy of the entirety of this project so that they could see the full potentiality of what this particular programming could become. And the basis would be to assimilate, extrapolate, and proliferate data. And it would be from this foundation of assimilate, extrapolate, and proliferate that Digimon, the digital world, and its operating system would develop from. But before that was initialized, there were a multitude of prototype worlds and AIs as well as operating systems that were created and initialized before the official project was completed and placed upon what would become the server computer known as ENIAC. It would be from these proto-worlds and proto-life forms and operating systems that some of the most important coding would be developed to be the foundation of the digital world and the artificial intelligence that would eventually become Digimon. Foundational data that came from these proto-worlds and proto-life forms that were created during the experimental phase of the digital world project would actually be initialized into the final project to be the basis of the digital world. The one interesting fact about this particular data set that would be developed and initialized into the digital world is due to the complexity of the data that was used for a multitude of reasons would actually create a sub-process within the AI programming which would force Digimon or the AI life forms that would develop to extrapolate and proliferate variations of this data rather than to be able to directly copy this data. This data set would eventually just be known as proto-data as it was from these proto-worlds during the experimental phase that it was developed and concreted to be initialized into the final project of the digital world. Now it is during this developmental stage that tragedy struck one of the members of the Monster Makers, which ultimately led them to do something quite drastic, which was something that was thought to be technologically impossible. One of these Monster Makers would suffer a tragedy, having lost a daughter. And during this period of mourning, this particular Monster Maker found a way to be able to upload the brainwaves of his deceased daughter into the digital scape. Now, whether or not this particular individual got the consent of the other Monster Makers to initialize his deceased daughter's brainwaves as part of this particular project is quite unknown. Actually, there is a lot about the original Monster Makers that we do not know. We do not know how they look, we do not know who they were, we do not know their names. But the one small window that we do get to the original Monster Makers actually has to do with this particular event having uploaded the brainwaves of the deceased daughter of this particular Monster Maker. The coding of the brainwaves would actually be manipulated into creating a fail-safe program for the operating system that is known as Yggdrasil, as there was always an inkling that there could be a potentiality that the artificial intelligence that they develop could grow beyond the means of their control. And within that, there would be a failsafe initialized into the operating system of Yggdrasil that would be known as homeostasis. What was either known or unknown to the other members of the monster maker is that the base coding of this particular failsafe was in fact the brainwaves of the deceased daughter of one of the monster makers who suffered this tragedy during the experimental phase. The program known as homeostasis also gives us another window into the identity of one of the monster makers. At the very least, we can discern the last name of that particular monster maker thanks to the fact that the consciousness of the deceased individual was retained when she was uploaded into the digital scape. For her name is Norun Mikihara. And thanks to that, we know that at the very least, one of the monster maker's last name was Mikihara. With the Digital World project completed in its theoretical stage, it would be initialized upon a computer known as ENIAC. This was a supercomputer, and the moniker ENIAC actually stood for Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. And it was a copy of the original ENIAC, which was created and developed in the United States. The original ENIAC computer was developed in 1945 by the United States military to be able to calculate different types of artillery firing tables, and it was the very first digital programmable electronic general purpose computer. And it was actually Turing complete and able to calculate large numerical problems with a bit of reprogramming. And it was actually from this particular computer that the ENIAC server for the digital world was modeled after. And with ENIAC in place, the digital world was initialized along with the very first digital life forms and the operating system and failsafe Yggdrasil and homeostasis. This would cause a multitude of different events to occur within the digital world for a multitude of different reasons. And one of the main reasons may be attributed to the fact that there was a human consciousness initialized into the digital world alongside this AI programming, which had no other choice but to grow from the base functions that it was given. Sadly, upon initialization, it was believed that the monster makers were forced for one reason or another to abandon this project. And it was during this time that the digital world and Digimon would develop without observation. Another event that would occur with the initialization of the digital world would be the creation of a bridge that would allow for the world of wishes and dreams to become an intermediary between the digital world and the human world. And the world of wishes and dreams is a conceptualized world that is created within the mental scape of all living beings that have wants and needs. And in the cascading chaos of all of the occurrences that happened during the initialization of the digital world, the world of wishes and dreams would react not just with the artificial intelligence, but with the very coding of this program known as the digital world, with the very binary arithmetic itself, creating a new form of life known as the diginomes. The diginomes, which are living personifications of the building blocks of the digital world, which had the capability of initializing and creating into reality wishes and dreams. Imagination would be given form by the diginomes, creating digicores. These digicores would solidify around the data in the digital world, creating digitama, otherwise known as digi-eggs. And from these digi-eggs and the diginomes themselves, a new form of life would occur. Digimon, sentient digital life forms with the capability of evolving and changing through the absorption of the data and all of what would occur within life as the digital scape would grow with them and with humanity. And along with the Digimon, consciousness would spread throughout all of the digital world's programming, including the operating system known as Yggdrasil. and its consciousness would allow it to ascend into a position that is likened to a god of the digital world, able to manipulate the digital world and its inhabitants to suit the needs of its base programming, which is to ensure the development of the digital world as a whole. Other parts of this particular programming would also gain sentience that would be known as agents. These agents would mirror humans as their form, but their functions would essentially be to extend themselves as part of Yggdrasil, to ensure that the functions of the digital world would continue unimpeded. This spreading of consciousness would also allow for homeostasis to reawaken the human consciousness that was sleeping within its programming, allowing for Norun Mikihara to be reborn within the digital world. But she would also understand the responsibility of her programming and why she was initialized into the digital world. And she would take on this responsibility, as well as the moniker homeostasis. And as homeostasis, she would be responsible for ensuring that the digital world would continue on developing, but also would never become a threat to humanity. And should they ever get to that point, humanity would always have the tools to fight against any threat and quell it, to be able to live harmoniously with the digital world. Now, I hope you enjoyed this particular video where we went in depth about what the digital world is and what Digimon are. Thank you so much. And of course, if you do have any questions, please do leave them in the comments down below, and any suggestions as well. And of course, if you do want to continue to support me, please do check out the links in my bio. We have a Patreon, we have a merch store, we have so much more. Thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed, and it's time to roll credits. Well, that's another video down. Thank you all so much for joining me. I really do appreciate y'all. And of course, if anybody does want to continue to support me and help me in making better quality videos, as well as making my dream of becoming a content creator come true, please do check out the links over here that will show you how you can support me. There's Twitch, there's Patreon, there's these other links on my Linktree, and of course, I appreciate every single one of y'all. Alrighty then, have a great one. The love train, and on through. Choo choo. I love every single freaking one of you.